Lamar, for that introduction. I'm pretty sure I'm not anywhere close to the smartest person you know, but nice to hear anyway. So just to tell you guys a little bit about myself, again, my name is Brenda Sanders. I'm a vegan advocate in Baltimore. I've been vegan for a long time, and more about that later. But so I am the executive director of an organization in Baltimore called Better Health, Better Life. And in Baltimore, our organization is dedicated to going into low-income neighborhoods in Baltimore and talking to people about the benefits of eating plant-based, talking about nutrition and that kind of thing. And then I recently stepped up as the co-director for Open the Cages Alliance, which is the animal rights organization that puts on the Vegan Living Program every year. So we're about to actually start revving up for the 2015 VLP. And so I have been living the vegan lifestyle for 18 years now. So I started when I was 1 year old. I did. I'll never tell. But so in that time, in the time that I have been vegan, I've talked to a lot of people about veganism, a whole lot of people. As a matter of fact, in the first couple of years that I became vegan, I couldn't stop talking to everybody about veganism. And even people who didn't want to hear about it, which back then in Baltimore, it was practically everybody who didn't want to hear about veganism, but I just couldn't stop talking about this lifestyle that had so dramatically changed my life. And nowadays, I mean, as time has gone on, people have become a lot more open and willing to talk about this lifestyle, which I think is great. Sometimes I'm out at the post office or in the grocery store and I'll hear somebody say the word vegan. I'm like, oh, who said that? Somebody said vegan, you know, because it hasn't been something that has happened for so long, and so now all of a sudden it's being talked about, and it's awesome. And so people describe veganism in a lot of different ways. Some people think of veganism as a diet. Other people talk about it in terms of a philosophy, and other people look at it more as a moral stance. And so I can say that in my time as a vegan, I've seen veganism in each one of those ways, if not more ways. But so when I first came into veganism, it was under the your body is a temple philosophy. And so it was like, oh, I'm one with everything, and you know, everything is interconnected, and my body is sacred, and all of this. And then I started to do research and study physiology and anatomy and get into nutrition. And so then I became much more focused on veganism as a diet and as the best diet, in my opinion, for the human vehicle. And that went on for years and years and years. And then more recently, I've started to really look at the moral implications of this lifestyle. So one of the things that I've been hearing a lot lately, probably within the last year or so, is people who describe veganism as a personal choice. And I hear it a lot, personal choice, personal choice, personal choice. And so I hear people who aren't vegan, I mean, they'll come to me and they'll say like, yeah, I really respect your lifestyle and I think it's great and everything that you're doing there, but I just really wish that vegans wouldn't try to push their personal choices on others. And I've also talked to other vegans, people who've been vegan for different periods of time, and they'll say, yeah, you know, I choose this lifestyle for myself, but I would never try to impose it on anybody else. And so in this lecture, I wanted to try to address this concept of veganism as a personal choice. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So veganism, as defined by Donald Watson in 1944, is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and any other purpose. And while I believe in this ideology completely, I honestly believe that veganism could be a lot more than just that. I believe that veganism could be a vehicle through which humanity can start to really tackle some of the most pressing issues that are facing us today. Things like global hunger, water pollution, destruction of habitat, species extinction, I mean, the list goes on and on. So I wanted to start with global hunger, and whenever I start to talk statistics, like global statistics, I start to see people fidgeting and like kind of checking their phones and losing interest, basically. And I understand that because a lot of times it's really difficult to connect with somebody 10,000 miles across the globe. But these kinds of statistics, in my opinion, are really, really important to just bring into focus how bad things are right now on the planet, and why we need to really start thinking about some of the ways that we can shift so that we can start to make things better. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that nearly 870 million people on the planet today are suffering from chronic malnourishment. According to the 2013 United Nations Food Program report, 5 million children die every year of malnutrition. Now, I ended up dealing with a lot of really huge numbers when I was doing the research for this lecture, and a lot of times those numbers just lose their meaning unless it's kind of broken down into smaller numbers, and so I went ahead and did that. So that 5 million children would come down to about 13,698 children who die every day, 570 children who die every hour, and about 10 children who die every minute from hunger. And if you wouldn't mind, I wanted to just kind of interject a personal story here. A lot of people probably do know that. I was going to say a lot of people probably don't know this, but now that I'm doing lectures, like everybody knows all my business. But I grew up really poor in one of the projects in Baltimore City, and was raised by a single mother. She worked a series of menial, like very low-paying jobs for our whole childhood. And sometimes she had 2 jobs. And I remember once when I was like 10, she had 3 jobs. And just to make ends meet, and sometimes ends still didn't meet. And so we didn't have food sometimes. And so I have experienced hunger. And so one of the things, I don't remember much of my childhood, it's all kind of a blur, but one of the things that I do remember is hunger. And the feeling of hunger, because I think a lot of people who've never really experienced it don't know that it hurts. Like, it's painful. But like it feels like your insides are trying to claw their way out. And it is like this physical yearning for something that is not there. And so I remember being little and kind of laying in bed at night, and I was a pretty morbid kid, so I would imagine like little things eating my insides, because I mean, I was in pain and I didn't know what was going on, and there was no way to fix it, and so I would just imagine that these weird things were going on inside me. But it's a really horrible thing to really be hungry. You know, a lot of us, we think of hunger as, oh, you know, I haven't eaten in 2 or 3 hours, I'm hungry. You're not. And I can tell you that real hunger hurts a lot. And so when I got older and I started learning about world hunger and I saw these pictures, it occurred to me that these feelings, these experiences that I had in spurts throughout my childhood, because we always knew that when Mom got paid again, we would have food again. But, you know, in between was kind of rough, but I knew that food was coming. And just knowing that there are people in other parts of the world who, like, that horrible pain of hunger is their everyday experience. And it's no wonder that they look like they're in pain. Like when you see, and I'm sure you've seen lots and lots of pictures, UNICEF and all these Feed the Children places, they make sure to take lots and lots of pictures to try to get that message across. But it's really, when I started to realize how many people were suffering this way, and especially how many children were suffering and dying this way, I knew that I had to do something, whatever thing I could do, whatever contribution I could make. And so that's a part of what I'm doing now. So how on earth do these global hunger statistics relate back to veganism? Well, I'll tell you. By now, some people have heard these different statistics like, it takes 13 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of meat. I don't know, like most people have, there's been documentaries and studies and all these things that come out that kind of equate this input with this output. And that doesn't really mean a whole lot to a lot of people, so I try to kind of give a picture of that. So in other words, all of this plant food would equal 1 pound of animal meat. More than 70% of the grains produced in America and 1/3 of the entire world's grain harvests are fed to animals who are raised as livestock. Meanwhile, in many developing countries, the poor farmers, these farmers who are living in poverty, actually go hungry even as they're growing crops to then export to the West in order to feed animals when they themselves and their families are actually starving. In 2013, scientists from the Institute on the Environment and the University of Minnesota published a study examining meat, dairy, egg production, and world hunger. Their research concluded that if food crops were fed directly to humans instead of to the animals that we use for food, there would be enough food to feed 4 billion additional people, which would obviously cover the 870 million hungry people around the world. The point that I'm trying to make here is that we in developing countries, or in developed countries, have the luxury and the privilege of allowing all these tons and tons, millions of tons of food crops to be shoveled into the bodies of these animals who are they only exist to be slaughtered and eaten anyway, while around the world people are literally starving to death. The fact is that every single one of us could be a part of the solution. By rejecting the animal use industry, we could send a really strong and clear message that we're not going to be a part of a system that is causing suffering, so much suffering across the entire planet, while only really benefiting a few very, very rich billionaires who actually run these industries. And while going vegan for us is not really a matter of life and death, I mean, you might have a better life. You might get more healthy by going vegan, but it's not a matter of life and death for us, but to people around the globe, it really would make all the difference in the world. So next I wanted to talk a little bit about water pollution. Did you know that there are 95 million cows in the United States right now? I had no idea. Like, as I was doing this research, I was like discarding source after source, like that can't be right, and finally I had to accept that there are 95 million cows in this country, and that's not to mention the 70 million pigs and the 9 billion chickens and all the other animals that are being raised in the U.S. right now. And I couldn't help but wonder, where do they put all these cows? I just couldn't, like, my brain couldn't fathom it. And then I started coming across aerial photos like these, and this is just one feedlot. There are a lot of these all over the country. And then it started to really make a little bit more sense to me. A single dairy cow produces about 120 pounds of manure a day, which is about the equivalent to what 50 humans produce in a day. Now, I did the math on this, and I did it first on my phone because I was just kind of at a cafe, and I did the math, and I was like, So then I pulled out the calculator, and I did the math, and then I went home and got the graphing calculator because it's much more expensive. But I did the math on these 95 million cows that are producing 120 120 pounds of manure every single day. And the number I came up with was 5,700,000 tons of manure is being produced in this country every single day. I did the math, trust me, every day, 5.7 million tons of manure is being produced. And so that's a lot of poo. And all this excess poo has to go somewhere. So of course some of it goes into the fertilizers that are sprayed on the crops. But let's face it, like 5.7 million tons of poo just far exceeds any of our fertilization needs here and probably around the whole world. And so I found out that a lot of this cow excrement is ending up in these things called manure lagoons, which are basically big poo ponds or lakes, depending on how big the livestock operation is. So, of course, it's inevitable that during heavy rains, a lot of these fertilizers that are put on the crops, as well as poop from from the manure lagoons, are going to get into the waterways, are going to get into our streams, our rivers, and ultimately into our oceans. And when that happens, something very awful occurs. This waste going into our oceans causes what are called dead zones in the oceans, which is basically an area within the ocean where no life can be, where literally all the oxygen is used up in that area. And so the marine life will just pop up dead in a huge section of the ocean. So as I was going through and doing this research and finding out that there are lots and lots of dead zones around the country and even around the world, it started to really bother me that we're dealing with this industry that's breeding millions and millions of animals. Breeding meaning forcibly breeding. The breeding is not a nice process. You're forcing someone to do something that they never gave you permission to do. And so they're breeding millions and millions of animals to meet the demands of developed countries like ours to eat these animals. And this breeding program has created this enormous amount of waste that's then going into our water systems and completely just causing devastation to our marine life. And it's not just the marine animals, but it's also like the coral, like everything dies. There's no oxygen. And then here's a fun fact for you. I don't know if you guys knew that 80% of our oxygen is made in the oceans. I did not know that. I thought that all the oxygen was made in the forest, and then I was like, oh no, they're cutting down the forest, we're all gonna die. Actually, only up to 20% of the oxygen that we are breathing is made by the trees, and then the other 80% is made by the phytoplankton in the ocean. So just the thought that we're causing this problem that is basically killing our oceans or sections of our oceans is, I think, pretty problematic. There are now at least 150 man-made dead zones in global waters. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa all have these dead zones of varying severity, some affecting an area as big as a country underwater. The good news is that if caught on time or in time, these marine ecosystems seem to be capable of bouncing back from these dead zones. And one example is that marine biologists have reported that the dead zone that was in the Black Sea has largely disappeared in the last decade. And it's been attributed to the fact that at the fall of communism, a lot of the agricultural enterprises in like Russia, Bulgaria, and Ukraine, they all folded, which meant less agricultural waste going into the Black Sea. And so they've seen a huge bounce back of the marine life and the marine plants and stuff like that. And so it's not yet known what the consequences of these widespread disruptions are going to be to the balance of our ecosystems, but this clear example with the Black Sea gives me hope that there's not a whole lot of cause for hope sometimes in the research and stuff that I do, but seeing that a marine ecosystem could come from dead back to life if we just remove the thing that was killing it gives me hope that if we start to shift away from what we're doing now, that we can still save our oceans. Now I wanted to talk about the destruction of habitat and species extinction, because this is a huge, huge deal, and we don't know much about this here in this country because much of the habitat that's being destroyed is being destroyed in the rainforest, because there's just not much land left here in America to destroy, and so there's a lot of land that's right now being destroyed in our rainforest. By far, the largest contributor to deforestation right now is agriculture. Forests are being clear-cut to graze animals, as well as to grow the crops that are going to be fed to the animals that are being raised. Every 6 seconds, an acre of rainforest is cut down for cattle farming. That's about 14,400 acres every day. And to help put that number into perspective, that's the equivalent, if you watch football, I don't know, but that's the equivalent of about 7 football fields being bulldozed every minute to support the farming of animals for consumption. Now, if we were to choose to grow plant foods instead, we would need only a tiny percentage of all this land that's being used to graze these animals. And thereby we would be preserving all this precious habitat that's being completely and relentlessly destroyed right now. A typical 4 square miles of rainforest is home to 1,500 species of flowers, 750 species of trees, 400 species of birds, 150 butterfly species, 125 mammal species, 100 species of reptiles, and 60 species of amphibians, and that's just like a quick list. I just named over 3,000 diverse species of animals and plants that are losing their habitats at this very moment and being driven to extinction. And it will continue to happen unless we choose a lifestyle that supports the planet instead of destroying it. Of course, I couldn't do a lecture about veganism without addressing those who are most affected by the animal exploitation industries, and that would be the animals themselves. Scientists have currently named and categorized 1.3 million species of animals living on the planet today, and 15,000 new species are discovered every year. And keep in mind, that's just the ones that have been discovered. It's estimated that there are many, many, many trillions of members of the animal kingdom inhabiting the planet alongside us right now. Humans make up such a tiny, tiny, teeny tiny portion of the life on this planet, and yet we're the ones who are wreaking the most havoc and causing the most destruction across the entire globe. Devastating our marine life populations through fishing, encroaching further and further into wildlife habitat, capturing, breeding, imprisoning animals for food, product testing, and entertainment. And so it really makes you wonder, because like when we talk about these things, it sounds really horrible, but then we go back to our lives and it's like just normal. And so it really makes me wonder, at least, why is it that this treatment of these other beings who we share the planet with, why is this so normalized? And so I've contemplated this thing, and I've thought it over, and I've read books and watched videos and everything, and I have come to the conclusion that the reason why we allow these things to happen is because of a program. It's a program that puts forth the notion that one group is somehow more valuable than another group, but just because of some arbitrary characteristic. I call this program the Power Over Others program, or POOP for short. The Power Over Others program is one that has, over time, fueled such beliefs as men are more valuable than women, whites are more valuable than those who aren't white, the rich are more valuable than the poor, a citizen is more valuable than someone who's undocumented, the young are more valuable than the elderly, those who are able-bodied are more valuable than the disabled. I mean, the list literally goes on and on and on and on. And this is also the same program, in my belief, that allows humans to assign lesser value to the whole rest of the animal kingdom. This power over others program is the basis for all forms of inequality, exploitation, oppression, discrimination, and injustice being perpetrated on the planet today. And I honestly believe that. I mean, our planet, the human race has no limitation to the awful that we are capable of, to the ways in which we're able to oppress each other, oppress the planet, to kill off whole animal species without even blinking an eye. And I honestly believe it's because of these hierarchies that we put in place that place us, whether the us is men or whether the us is white people or whether the us is, heterosexuals or whatever, it places the us in the place of higher value. And then once you've placed yourself in a place of higher value, you can do anything to the ones who you deem as lower. I believe that the Power Over Others program is so widespread and so entrenched because we, all of us, feed into it. I believe that we support it in our thoughts and in our actions. And I believe that we are the ones who keep it going. Because honestly, we can have all our conspiracy theories about the government and the Illuminati, I don't know, just all of these dark forces that are, creating this horrible situation that we're all in. But nobody's twisting most of our arm to do the things that we're doing. And even if we're not doing the things that other people are doing, if we just kind of sit by and let it happen and don't speak up and don't try to stop it, then we're kind of a part of the problem. And there's a great quote by somebody about that, and I don't know what it is. And I don't know, just go find it. If you just sit by silently and do nothing, you're actually a part of the problem or something like that. So you might be wondering what I mean exactly when I say that we're supporting this Power Over Others program. Think about it. Every single day we go to the store, wherever, the mall, and we buy these products that were made in sweatshops. So handbags, clothes, shoes, electronics, whatever. And we kind of know. At this point, we kind of know that these products were produced somewhere in some sweatshop where somebody was getting paid way less than they can afford to live on. And then it was shipped over here and the price was hiked up so that somebody could make a huge profit. We know, but we just kind of push it aside and don't think about it. But the fact of the matter is that these workers in Bangladesh, these workers in Nicaragua, these workers in Haiti deserve better than that. Are their lives any less valuable that they should have to be kept in poverty because we want some Gap jeans? I don't think so. Then, of course, you have the chocolate that we buy from companies that knowingly use child slave labor to harvest and process their cacao beans. Hershey and, Nestle, and I don't know, a lot of them are probably owned. I think most of them are owned by one company now. But this chocolate, unless you look, you check and you see that it was humane or it was
fair trade.
Yeah, fair trade and that kind of thing. Then you can pretty much guarantee that it's being harvested by African kids who are not being compensated, which is slavery. And so you go and you get the chocolate and you're eating it and it's really good, and you're not realizing that you're also eating the child slave labor that went into it. And as far as I'm concerned, these children deserve to have a life free from grueling, often very dangerous. Some of these children, they have to scale these high cacao trees Sometimes they fall, they break bones, they die. And I mean, it's just free labor, so who cares? And of course, people are eating the product of suffering and death every time they consume meat, dairy, and eggs and other animal-derived products. The consumption of the bodies of animals is so widespread and deeply entrenched in our culture, in fact, that people are always telling me how extreme my diet is. And I'm sure the other vegans in the room have heard or read or whatever that, it's an extreme diet, it's so extreme. As if taking animals, caging them, brutalizing them, killing them, skinning them, chopping up their bodies to be cooked and eaten isn't extreme compared to eating vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, and beans. I mean, really think about that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not standing up here trying to proclaim to be Miss Perfect and I do everything right, because I don't think anybody does everything right. As far as being a conscientious person, a person who walks conscientiously on the planet, I fall short in certain areas. I take showers that are way too long, I do. And I understand about water conservation, but showers are sometimes like the place where I can relax, it's quiet, the door's closed, there's nobody, mommy, sometimes I take really long showers. Sometimes I drive to places that are definitely within walking distance. Mostly I convince myself that I'm really, really in a hurry and I have to hurry up and get there, and so I don't have time to walk, but no, I'm just being lazy. And let's see, the hunger thing, I try to be very conscientious of my waste, how much I waste, especially food, because of the fact that I understand about world hunger, but sometimes I get to the end of the week and there's leftovers that are not edible, and so I have to throw them out. And a lot of times I do beat myself up about that. But then I think about the fact that I'm vegan and also that I go out and talk to other people about veganism and hopefully help encourage them to make that step as well. And I know that is has far more of an impact on the planet itself and all the inhabitants and all the life here than recycling or whatever, which I do recycle. So now I want to do something that that makes a lot of my activists and vegan advocate friends cringe a bit when I do this in my lectures. And I want to let everybody off the hook, anybody who has made any of these transgressions, I want to let you off the hook by saying, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Nobody in this room invented world hunger. Nobody in here, I'm guessing that nobody in here owns a big cattle ranching thing, with the manure ponds out back. I'm just guessing that nobody in here created these situations that we're in. This power over others program was already in place, and it's been in place for a long time, since way before any of us were born. So as much as I want to beat up on myself and even beat up on other people sometimes about what we're doing on the planet right now, about the state of the world, I try not to do that, and I try to instead think about what can be done to solve the problem. And to me, going vegan and living this lifestyle is one of the things that could have the biggest impact on the planet today. Huge. I mean, how many things can we honestly say in our everyday lives that we do that can change the world? We get up, go to work, we eat a meal, come home, watch reality TV, whatever people do. And none of those things really makes a huge impact on the entire planet. But going vegan, each individual person that goes vegan literally changes the world for the better. We can't change what's come before, but every single one of us can be a part of what comes next. And that's the thing that is so exciting to me, and that's the thing that gets me doing these lectures, and that's the thing that gets me out of bed every morning, honestly. Because after all this research, like all these things you've seen, lots of other things that I didn't show, without the hope that things could be better, there would be no reason to get out of bed, honestly. This world is jacked up. So, can veganism really be considered a personal choice? Getting back to the whole personal choice thing. When so many lives are directly related or directly affected by the things that we choose. And with so very much at stake, can people who already are vegan really afford to kind of sit back and say, well, I don't want to impose, my beliefs on other people? I don't think so. With all of these pressing problems that we're faced with today, I know that veganism is a viable solution. That's not just wild speculation by some crazy vegan lady. Like, this is fact. Rejecting the animal use industries and all the destruction that they're currently bringing to the planet, people, animals, ecosystems of the world. This is, again, one of the most important and powerful decisions that any single person can make. Because the choices that we make today will have a monumental impact on the lives of everybody living on this planet tomorrow. Thank you. So did anybody have any questions or comments or just want to?
Sure. I have a question.
Sure.
Actually, I posted something on Facebook about a year ago, kind of along the same thing that you presented here today. And the response I got back from another vegan was, the world hunger thing is a political issue. And he was kind of rejecting the, I was kind of going through the same stats. It takes this amount of grain to feed this amount. And his point was that it doesn't matter if the whole world goes vegan or not, that you still are going to have hunger because it's more of a political issue than than an issue with feeding cattle and using resources to feed animals that then feed people. Right. How should I respond to that? Because I couldn't argue. I didn't respond. I just let him say it. But I didn't have anything to come back to him with,
Yeah.
And I just was curious if you've run into that, and if so, how you may have responded to something like that.
Well, I sincerely look forward to running into that. I haven't, but I enjoy those kinds of challenges. I think that my unique way of seeing the world is a lot different from folks who make comments like, oh, it's a political thing. Because I think that while, these political systems do exist and they do exert a certain amount of power over us as the people, we will always have more power to change the world. And that has been shown throughout history, that when the people finally have had enough and they finally decide that they will not stand for the way that things are right now, and they decide to step up and change things, they always change. Things always, if you want to, whether you're talking about the French Revolution, to be any kind of, situation where there was a shift in the power structure, I would say that while it's true that there are certain political structures that exist in these regions of the world where this extreme poverty exists, well, first of all, not destroying our planet is the first and foremost thing that we need to focus on, because this is just, there's no other place. I mean, we haven't colonized Mars yet. Like, we really do need to take care of this place first and foremost. And as it pertains to the people who are suffering, we could stop that. We could all stop that. We could all demand that something different happen. And when we're talking about politics, we're talking about power structures. We're talking about people who have installed themselves most times as these authorities. But but they're having authority over a really large, massive group of people in most cases. And so when that massive group of people decides to expand their consciousness, to expand their circle of compassion outside of themselves and their own misery, or their own lack of misery, like in the West, when people decide to turn off their televisions and actually give a crap about the rest of the world, then things will shift and things will change. But it has to start somewhere, and I believe that it will start with people having the consciousness and the awareness to decide to reject the whole paradigm. And that's what veganism is about. It's about rejecting everything you've been taught. It's about rejecting everything that the media is tossing at you, everything that you see in your environment. It's like, no thanks. And so I would say to somebody like him, you're right and you're wrong. And I'm going to show you, through my advocacy, that we, the people, can make a change.
And by the way, this was one of my vegan friends who doesn't say anything. He doesn't want to oppose. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if it was. Yeah, I think it's a good point. You're right and you're wrong, because it goes back to hanging your hat on one data point and then just saying, okay, that's it. It's like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because there may be a political element to the world hunger, but so I'm not going to acknowledge the rest of it, kind of thing. So, yeah.
Right. And I think that a lot of people in their inactivity have just said, I throw my hand, they've thrown their hands up and said, it's too big, it's too hard, I'm only one person, there's nothing I can do. And it's just not true. And that's what I try to tell people. One person every one person who has gone vegan has made a huge change on the planet already. So,
You got to start with yourself. I mean, once you make the decision to become vegan, however you led to it. Mine was reading Eating Animals. Which led me to the China study, and I said, okay, I'm done. But I have a sphere of influence. I don't have the sphere of influence that is global, but I have the sphere of influence that are people that I connect with. When I had breast cancer, my surgeon said, "You're vegan?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How can you do that?" So we started talking, and he said, I started bringing food every time I come to visit him. I bring something to eat, cookies, whatever. And he said, "Well, I need to lose some weight," and he does. So he's looking at, he and his wife both now. I don't, the first thing people have said to me is, I'll never be able to become vegan. Well, it's not what you give up, it's what you get. And it's how you as an individual take your passion, which I think is so beautifully from you, and transform it into an energy field around you that impacts everybody else. I don't think of the power to change the world, but I can change the people around me, or I can be the belief that changes somebody's mind.
But you could also be the one that changes the mind of that one person that then goes to change the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Anybody else?
that was